Hi, I'm Kevin Tetz for AMD Garage, and in this video we're going to show you how to install an outer roof panel on a second generation Camaro. Now this is commonly referred to as a roof skin, so we're going to call it that throughout the video. And even though this panel is made for this Camaro, the procedures we're going to show you for installation follow multiple different marks. Whether it's a Camaro, pickup truck, or a Mopar, these steps should get you through this project on any vehicle. We're also going to walk you through really important details that you're going to need to know about this project, such as supplies that you'll need to have a successful project, tools and equipment that you're going to need to have a professional result, and a realistic estimate on what kind of time it's going to take to invest into this project so you have a successful outcome. Let's talk about tools you're going to need. We've got some hammers and dollies here because you're going to need to move metal around carefully without doing too much damage to it. Got some scrapers, some hand cutting instruments, and something to grind our welds with. Speaking of welds, we're going to need some welding equipment. I've got a MIG welding setup that operates off a 110 circuit, and we've got a spot welder as well. We'll show you the difference between the two and how they can both help you get a professional result. I've got some panel clamps because we're going to need to clamp the panel in place, and of course, appropriate PPE. You want to protect your hands, eyes, ears, and especially if you're welding, protect your skin from that arc because, let's face it, we don't want to be in a dangerous situation doing any kind of a DIY project. Here's some supplies that you're going to need to do this job properly. I've got some weld-through primer for obvious reasons. We want to put this on the exposed areas between two pinch panels that we're welding. I've got a coating here that's going to protect the factory E-coat and enhance it just to make sure that it's a corrosion barrier from now on, since we're putting two panels together that we don't have access to. I've got a seam sealer to replace any factory seams that might have been taken out during the process, and also this flexible foam here that's designed to be applied inside two panels that are very close together to keep them from drumming or vibrating. We're also going to install silent drive thermal insulation. This is an opportunity for us to make our car feel, sound, and function better than the factory did. We're dealing with two captured panels we're not going to have access to, so we can apply these products and control vibration, sound quality, and heat dissipation within the panel. So we're absolutely installing this. We'll show you how. On a difficulty scale, we're going to give this a 4 out of 5. It's a 4 because although the panel is stamped very precisely for this vehicle and no hardcore fab is required, you do have to possess specialty tools and equipment for welding and the skill to use them. A roof skin is an integral part of a unibody structure, and it has to be installed properly. So this gets a 4 out of 5. A safe estimate for installing a roof skin on a classic vehicle is around 10 hours. That makes it a project that you can spread out comfortably over the course of a weekend. We're going to show you a couple of the spot weld cutters that we used. Now the goal is to cut through one side of a pinched double panel. You can see the outer holes right here. We've just cut through the outer panel, and that helps us remove the existing panel. Here's a couple of different spot weld cutters. That one chucks up into a drill. They all do, actually. This one has a center pin and a reversible blade, a dual blade right here. And this one involves the blade that's replaceable as well as the center pin, which acts as a locating device. All three of these are used. They all work very well. Some people choose to use a grinder on the spot weld heads themselves, but I've found that a spot weld cutter over the years ends up saving me time in prep and a little bit less distortion between the panels when you go to separate them. All right, so I tried a couple of different spot weld cutters out. This is the one that I like the best. This is from a company called Blair. This end is double-sided, and it's a hardened steel, so when the blades break, it just goes for poop. But you've got two sides on a particular bit, and they're fairly easy to change out, and I've found that this one works the best for me. This is a little spring pointer thinger, and I had to drill a little pilot nebula in the middle, and so what? So that works the best for me. I've seen all kinds of people on the tube that say use an air hammer and just straighten it out after you're done, drill all the way through and just weld it from the bottom, and to each his own. I don't want to move the backing panel. I want to drill a hole in the front panel. I don't want to have to body work the braces. So this is my favorite method, and yeah, back 3 or 4 or 5 videos ago when I was drilling spot welds on the rocker panel and I had the drill going in the wrong direction and it was skating all over the place, yeah, that's on me. So I just want you to know that I know that you know that I know that you know. Anyway, here we go. So I'm going to use my handy dandy spot weld cutter, and I know there's a longer one of these. This is the one I have. I've got one on order with the long thing. Chris Lee was talking about that. So, and we're gonna just try and separate this panel. So overall, we're in pretty good shape here. I found a little boo-boo right there. When we cut the lower part off to put the rocker in, I sliced through the inner brace right there. I'll stitch that up. I'll put some hot glue in there and weld that up. But if you look at the integrity of the metal, I'm very happy with this. On my Z-Sled car, all this was rotten. It was just rotten. We had to put a used piece in. And up here, I got some dressing to do on some spot welds. We'll get to that and do that like as a group effort. I've got one little overlap here. We'll just get rid of that. I'll grind that out something. Up here, to finish the removal of said quarter panel, I'll drill these spot welds out, and this piece will just fall out on my foot. And yeah, we know how that goes. And then that will get us done, because I don't want to just blindly cut this out. There's a flange that both these panels sit on. So it's a 3-panel intersection. I want to protect the metal, and I want to make sure it's there and put this back like the general put it together the first time. So that's why I'm being so stupid, fastidious, picky on my methods of drilling out spot welds. So yeah, throw your internet stones. Everybody has their own way of doing stuff. There's more than one way to skin the cat, as they say, and to me, this is the way to skin the cat. It takes a little longer, but it preserves the shape of the metal, in my opinion. Anyway, okay, cool. So moving on. So this, actually this has Matco stamped all over it, but this is a spot weld cutter with a backer. So with this guy, it's pneumatic, puts pressure on, and it's supposed to be a nice guide that doesn't burn through. So I'm gonna try this. I forgot I even had this. My compressor would barely fill up a bicycle tire. So we're gonna see how long my compressor lasts and see how many of these spot welds we can get done. Because this right here, I did the guy's method to where I just used a air chisel and it made freaking hamburger out of this flange, and I don't like it. I want more control than that. So anyway, we're gonna try this, see where we get. So I'm gonna have to exercise a little more self-control than that, because that burned exactly right through. All right, so right here, this part is not welded on from the factory. You can see the sealer that they used here is bulged out there. So this part is clamped over. It's rolled over just like a door skin. So we've got to chisel that off. There, see how that's separated now? We'll just work our way down. Work that panel. That rolled over section off. Putting these back on is fun too. Gets you really good at your hammer and dolly finesse. I'm gonna get a better angle. on there, man. It would help if I could completely cut through on this end. Now that'll give me a little bit of leverage there. Just about went too far there. You see that? I'm gonna have to repair that because it's important to have that intact. Oh. I have an idea. Why don't I get these designed for that? It's stuck by that adhesive, which is a good thing. That's why these cars stick together for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years. There we go. And this is good except for where it's not. Yeah, like I said, I'll just have to run a bead of weld, fix that area there, and just dolly that out. We'll have plenty of options to test fit and see how this is going. The bottom line is that this metal's in good shape, except for where I tried to make it into more than one piece of metal. But hey, we are not past the point of not being able to recover, so that's good. All right, onward, over, upward. So there's some surface prep that has to happen. As far as the new panel goes, well, it's kind of ready to go right out of the box. It's on, be very careful with it. It's on a panel stand, and I've got gloves on just to protect my hands. But you can see on the inside, it's AMD's high-quality E-coat electrodeposition primer. There's no scuffs, there's no scars in it. You want to give it a good inspection, make sure that there's no box scrubs or things like that. But for now, this is ready to go. Personally, I like to leave the E-coat intact, especially on a blind internal panel like this. Some people choose to scuff and paint. That's your preference. We are going to use some sound insulation on the back side of this, but for now, we've got some other fitting steps to do before we actually commit to welding. So we're just going to leave this guy like it is. Now, one more thing. When you're moving this panel around, you can see right here, we've got a pronounced bend and a flange. This is where the windshield sits in the pocket, right? When you're moving this, it's best to move it around, picking it up by the strongest part of the panel. On the side, you can see how much deflection there is on it. There's no way to get around that. It's a big, large panel. But when you're moving it, pick it up from here, and you can just move it around easily, set it down on the other part, on the opposite side, which is equally as strong, and we can gently set it there, and it's going to wait for us until we're ready for it. All right, so as far as prep here, we've got the factory primer here. We can give it a good thorough inspection for welds. We can take pieces like this. This is part of the original trim. These are dry rotted and crusty. Obviously, they're going to be replaced. Get rid of those guys. These are the plastic retainers for the headliner bows. We're going to leave those intact and leave those right there because we're not sure exactly what direction we're going to go with the headliner itself. But these guys, I call them gumdrops, these are factory bits of sealer. You can tell how close these panels are together, the inner right here and the outer that sits on top of this. The factory puts this in here so it mutes the sound a little bit and it keeps the panels from fluttering or bumping into each other. But I'm going to get rid of this stuff just because we're going to replace it with some newer technology and also make room for some silent drive sound insulation. Obviously, we've got some dust to clean off, but this panel is in really good condition. Here's your opportunity to super inspect all the internal areas like this in here. There's an opportunity for corrosion to happen in little areas like this. Now's the time to address that and put a primer on it. We don't need to, we got super lucky with this, but even right there, you can see bare metal exposed right here. All we got to do is do a light surface prep on that and we're good to go. But if we don't do that, that's just an opportunity down the road. So make sure that you're giving it a good thorough inspection and getting it ready to, quite frankly, never be seen again. So I'm going to use a cleaner followed by a abrasive scuffing pad. This does two things at once. It actually removes any kind of contamination from the surface as well as sets it up for a coating. I've got a rolled on primer here. We had a little bit of mild surface rust here and we treated that, used an encapsulating epoxy product on here, and the rest of it was good enough to just leave alone for a while. So this is going to take care of the sanding scratches. We are going to coat it with a paint to make sure that it's completely sealed in. But for now, we're using a solvent-based wax and grease remover to help us clean the contamination. And we're scrubbing it with the scuffing pad to be efficient, to get a sanding action and a bit of a sanding scratch in that surface so that our coating will stick. If you don't have Body Shop wax and grease remover, acetone works good. Just make sure you're wearing gloves. And also, brake parts cleaner is a good cleaning solvent as well. Any kind of a citrus-based cleaner, like a simple green, that works well. Just make sure that you clean the residue off before moving on to any coatings. Also, another good reason to wear gloves while doing something like this are all the little places, the edges and stuff that they can get you. You don't want to slice up your hands. All right, so that gets that done. So while that is drying out in between the pinch seams, we've got a little correction to do on this metal flange. It's not terrible, but there's places like that where you can see that that's bent. It's from the removal process. Also, we want this completely bared because when we weld this, we don't want that factory primer interfering with the bond that we're going to get with our weld. So we've got a little bit of hammer dolly and some surface prep. So this is what the roof skin sits on the front and the rear. This has been distorted because we took the other panel off, and it hasn't been important to make it perfect until now. We want a very consistent mating surface, so we're going to adjust this with a hammer and a dolly and make sure that it follows the crown or the curve of the new panel that we're going to put on it. We want to create a very consistent mating surface. This needs to be pretty flat because the other one is really flat, so we're going to use a hammer and dolly and just kind of adjust this and make sure that it follows the same contour. The rest will be taken care of with clamps. So we're going to grind this primer out that's left in the low spots, but also you can see that little bit of a step right there. I'm going to grind that flush because that's part of the original roof skin that hasn't quite been ground flush yet. I don't want any corrosion opportunities in between little chunks of a panel like that, so we're going to go through and just prep that completely. Use a belt sander for that with a heavy grit. Also took care of the welds right here. Since that's a mating surface also, your roof skin attaches here to the sides and rolls around underneath this particular flange here. But that sets us up for taking care of a rust preventative coating on the panel itself and moving on to the next steps, which are weld through primer and test fitting. Obviously, we've done the same steps on the front flange as we did to the back. Hammer dolly it flat, make sure that there's none of that primer on there. This sets it up for a nice flush weld and flush mating surface on the back. And also on the other sail panel, we've gotten these welds ground down flush. So now we're going to slide the roof skin up on there and test fit it. It's probably going to happen a couple of different times. That's why I'm not doing any coatings up here like I said I was going to. That'll happen after I know where my cut lines are and when I've got my roof skin dialed in completely. Then we'll coat this and we'll put our insulation on and put our insulation on the bottom of the roof skin as well. We'll talk you through that when we get there. But I just want to do that at the last stage to where we're completely prepared to move forward, because it's going to be the last time that we see the insides of both of these panels. But for now, we're test fitting. This is a little awkward because the panel's so big. It's not bad, I'm just sliding it up. Things about a rotisserie make this both easier and more difficult. This is this is one of those situations where you should probably have a second set of hands. Get a buddy to help you set this on and off a couple of different times. I just want to show you that it can be done by yourself if you're careful. All right, so that is actually pretty dang close. Come back here and take a look at this. So back here, right here you can see, obviously there's the new panel. Here's your underlying panel. This is where the factory leaded seam goes. I'll trim that piece off so we have a flush fit between the inner panels and the outer roof skin. This, we're going to deal with that later because it involves a lot of fun with hammer and dolly. But this right here is mostly what I was wanting to look at. So when I cut the original roof skin off, I made sure that I cut it up high. This panel right here, we'll do obviously a butt weld right there, but I didn't want to cut too much of the A-pillar off because we want to make sure that we've got not only a nice flat mating surface here, but also a good weld here to where we don't have to put an intermediate patch. So now we're going to mark that. We'll pull the panel off again. We'll trim the panel and then test fit it again. Ish. All right. There we go. All right, so the cut I made is above my Sharpie line. That means I'm leaving more material on than I eventually will, but I want to make sure that I can kind of sneak up on this cut. This right here, this will still allow me a test fit with this flange here, but I am going to remove this part of the roof skin. Should be fairly easy. We've got a spot weld almost drilled out there. There might be another one there, and then we'll just cut that guy straight across. This is going to do us for test fitting now. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And we're going to trim the B-pillar or the sail panel flanges off of the roof skin where it overlaps right here. I'm going to do those with hand shears. So I'm going to use aviation snips and trim this off. There's any number of ways that you can trim that off, but I want it right on there where it's bent over. I'm going to trim that to where it's completely flat with the aviation snips. What I like about them is that if you go nice and slow, there's not very much metal distortion. And there's no burr from a grinded or cut-off wheel or ground edge. We're going to just work our way up. All right, let's take a look at this. I'm going to come up and over. I got to push it forward a little bit. Biggest thing to remember is that we're not telling the metal where to go. We're asking it nicely to move over to where we want it. So just using gentle persuasion. Trying to lift that top corner up. I'm kind of hooked over there, so I'm just gonna work smarter, not harder, and set this up. Yeah, just hooked on the corner. That's more like what I wanted. Okay. All right, so back here, I got to notch that a little bit more because I'm proud of this, probably 3/8 of an inch, or if not almost a ½ an inch. So we've got to slide back. Can't slide back because of that. I can trim that off real quick with the shears. But up here, there we go. All right, so that's about where we need to be there. So we're close on this cut. We're super close, but still need to shave a little bit off. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to come in here. I'm just going to trim about 1/8 off. But instead of doing it on the pillar, I'm going to do it on the panel because this wraps around here, and every time I cut through that, I risk damaging the part underneath. And I also know that right here, yeah, that's about the right ratio. Right here is about the right amount that I need to trim off. And then we'll try it again. All right, so we've got our 1/8 inch there and our little notch right there. We use the 16th inch cutoff blade to do that. All right, so with the panel back up on the car again, the back, I'm pretty happy with that. My little notch right there is in the right place. Now the front is where it still needs some work. Obviously, we don't have a drop-down flush fit here. We're getting closer, but to really see where this fits, it has to be down and fully seated on there. So here's where I'm gonna make some relief cuts. I'm gonna cut on the roof skin here and here. That's going to allow me to open that panel up and let it sit down on top. The reason I'm doing it on the roof skin, on the replacement panel, rather than the pillar here, is because once I get the fit, yeah, I got to pull the roof off again, but I can address the bare metal on the inside of that edge super easy with just flipping the panel up. I can put my weld-through primers on there, and it's very difficult for me to do. If I do a relief cut down here, I don't have access to it. So I'm going to sacrifice the top, open it up a little bit, get our nice flat seat And yeah, it's a process. Just remember that. All right, let's see what that does. All right, so that's going to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. All right, let's see what we got. So right away I can tell that as this comes down, it also comes forward. I also know that I've got a little more trimming to do on this A pillar. Right about there. I'm just going to leave that marked. So I'm going to go to the other side, balance it down, and what that's going to do is allow us to get a seat on the front and rear flanges, and then we can adjust left and right, diagonal, all that kind of stuff, and make sure it's in its happy place. It's a process. All right, so you can already see that all of this stuff here is all starting to cooperate much better. It's not perfect, but it's so much closer. So what we're going to do now is put an insurance clamp up here and follow this around. And obviously we've still got some overlap to trim here. So what I'm going to do now is, instead of using my Sharpie to mark where I want to trim, I'm going to use a pick or an awl. The pick is going to give me a much more precise line as to exactly where I need to trim, whereas the Sharpie gives me about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. It's really kind of not that accurate. And this is a tiny, look at that, this is a tiny little tip. And that should get us super close. If it all doesn't seat, it's not going to fit properly. Here's what I'm talking about. This flange along here, this isn't exposed. This has to roll underneath, and you can see it's not seated properly. This has to roll around underneath there and capture and pinch that panel just like a door skin does. So unless everything else is perfect, this is not going to roll around, and you're going to have bulges and a fit issue on either end of the sides of your skin. It all has to work kind of in concert together. So now we'll pull the skin off one more time, hopefully, and make some adjustments. All right, so this fit is making me happy. We're pretty dang close here. right there is a flush fit. I want a little bit of a gap. And right here, that's going to close up nicely. And we'll just form that around and bodywork that in. It'll be great. And right here, it's a nice natural seat. So that tells me that we're fitting right here. Let's look at the back. On the back, same thing. This is going to be a nice natural seat right here. We're flush back here. This body line comes right into that body line. I might have to trim that a little bit, grind it down. Regardless, that's a nice fit. Here's what's really important. The reason you fit the back and the front is to get the sides to fit. Here's what I'm talking about. That little flange there, you can see where the overlap is of the roof skin itself. And it's pretty consistent and even all the way across. Well, that needs to be about 3/8 of an inch on either side. It needs to be symmetrical because that is not welded on. That is dollied around just like a door skin, like we've talked about. And we need to make sure that it's not running into any interference as we tap it around. It's just a pinch. And this looks good on both sides. We're symmetrical side to side. But what I'm going to do is just trim this just a little bit more. I'm going to open up that just a taste. And then we should be ready to do the final panel prep, which involves a couple of other things. Don't worry, we'll walk you through it. Yeah, that's it. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, so I've checked all four corners and side to side. This is where it needs to go. So I'm going to make some reference marks here, just to give me a quick reference for the next time I line this up. And also right here, I'll do the same on the other side. And that gives us our final position for the top. It's a lot of testing, it's a lot of cutting, but it's necessary. You want to make sure that you're confident when you burn this thing in. Now, finally, we can address the internal panel prep on both the bottom of the factory inner panel as well as the underside of the AMD outer panel. I'm going to be using two different coatings on this project. One is a E-coat replacement, but any type of a paint product or a primer product will work as long as it's got direct to metal capabilities. The other one is a zinc weld-through primer. We've got bare metal on our inside flange, and you always want to have that added layer of protection against rusting with any type of a pinched panel that's welded together. The other thing, I want you to be safe. I've got gloves, glasses, and a paint-safe respirator. Don't use a dust mask. Invest in a respirator. It's always best to be healthy and use a best practice mentality when you're around any paint products. All right, so I think we're ready to go. So it feels great knowing that we know exactly how to put the roof skin on for the last time. And now we've got an opportunity and kind of a responsibility. What we're going to do is put a coating on this. All the exposed bare metal needs to be covered up so that this vehicle and these panels last another 60 years, hopefully longer. So I've got a little bit of masking to do, and since this is already cleaned and scuffed, we're ready to go with the coating. So this is just 3/4 inch masking tape. What I'm doing here is I'm covering up the bare metal with the tape. The reason I'm doing that is because it requires a specific type of a primer. It requires a weld-through primer, which is in a spray can, but it's a zinc coating, and it helps to seal in the metal as we weld it in. It actually shrinks back around our welds when we attach two panels together. And just like any paint project, you want to make sure that you don't touch any of the bare metal with your bare hands. I've got gloves on most of the time that I touch bare metal. Right now I don't, but I'm being very careful not to touch the bare metal. There's oils and acids that can come off of our skin. We just don't want that interfering with either the adhesion of the paint materials that we're going to put on, or to get it in the way of any kind of a welding. All right.
Now I'm just going to flip over the rotisserie and I'll get the other side and we'll wait for that to dry and then move on. All right, that's starting to flash off, which means dry on the top. So what I'm going to do now is take off my tape off the bare metal. I'll just spray my weld-through primer on these areas. That little bit of overspray is not going to hurt anything, and now we've got that rust protection that we need on that captured panel.
All right, well, that flashes off. Let's talk about the top panel. There is some prep on the bottom side, but first I'm going to prep some on the top side. I'm going to get rid of this E-coat along the top here because we're going to be doing some welding and I don't want the E-coat to interfere with it. And then we can flip it over and address the bottom. All right, so honestly I expected there to be more damage on this because we've been sliding it on and off of the body, but it's not too bad. We've got a few little scratches here, and on here we've got some scuffs and scrapes. So I'm going to scuff that a little bit, hit it with some weld-through primer. But this is really what I wanted to address. In corners like this right here, where I've cut it apart and we're going to weld it back again. I want to address that. I'm going to scuff it up really nicely and put some weld-through primer there just to do everything I can to protect the backside of it, because we're not going to have the chance because it's going to be locked down. So a little more scuffing, a little more prepping, and then we'll talk about our silent drive. All right, so I'm going to put a MIG weld at each corner, one in the middle, and that's going to anchor it nicely. The rest of it I'll fill in with the spot welder all through here because it's faster and there's way less after weld prep to do. All right, like we said before, I'm going to use a combination of a MIG welder and a spot welder or resistance welder. I'm going to anchor the corners with a MIG welder about there, one in the middle. I'm just marking out my holes. The rest of it I'll fill in with a spot welder. It's minimal prep and does a great job of pinching the two panels. That's how these cars were built at the factory. This is just a punch. Produce a 3/8 diameter hole. So obviously, if you don't have the punch tool, I do body work, I've been doing body work for a long time, but if you don't have the punch or flange tool, obviously a 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch drill bit will get you there. Also going to put a couple of holes right here because this is where the roof skin attaches to the top of the sail panel or the B pillar. We'll space them out a couple of inches apart, and that should be plenty. So that takes care of all of the bare metal scratches. The entire perimeter is done in a weld-through primer. This is ready to install, except for the silent drive installation that we're going to put in. So while this paint dries, we are going to look at top side of the car. This silent drive installation comes in roughly 20 by 32 inch sheets, plenty big enough to do super large panels. But I've trimmed mine down to 10 inches wide because I want to sit them in between where the headliner bows slide into here. I don't want to interfere with that. So we're just going to go right in between here. But I want you to remember this. Listen. It takes about 2 seconds for the sound to go away. So we're just going to apply one. There's no real method to doing this, just making sure that you've got a good contact patch. So we're going to stay outside of our lines that we wanted to stay outside of. It's about in the middle. I'm going to take a roller and roll this out, flatten it out, just to make sure I've got a good contact patch. All right, now listen. Big difference, and that's just one. We're doing 4. Like I said, I'm going to do one here, same on the other side. So we'll flip this thing over and get to them. So I'm using complete sheets of the 3-in-1 insulation on the inside of the roof skin. When you're using this, make sure that it's a super clean surface. For us, it doesn't get any cleaner than brand new fresh E-coat. So here's a tip for putting this stuff on. I've got my peel away backing only halfway. That allows me to set this end where I've got it marked out. It doesn't get away from me. So now I can smooth it on as I peel away the backing. We'll just press it firmly and make sure we've got good adhesion. And this is going to go a long way to vibration control. It's going to help us with a solid feel of the car when we close the doors. And it's going to help keep the car warm in the wintertime when the heater's on, as well as dissipate or reflect actually some of the heat. If we're sitting in a parking lot, or maybe we're on power tour doing 4 miles an hour going into an event. And that gets us ready to put this roof skin on the car. Now, up until now, I've been sliding the roof panel up onto the car, and I didn't really take too much precaution in scratching anything, but I don't want to get any bare metal exposed. And I don't want to tear up my insulation. I want a little bit of a cushion. There we go. That'll work. It actually kind of helps. Slide it front. All right, we got a little ways to go. I should be able to just pull it out from the other side. So, let that sit right there, more or less where it goes, and it actually finds its home really nicely now. Perfect. There it comes. I've double checked everything. It's absolutely where I want the panel. Side to side, front to rear, we are locked in. And I've added a couple of extra clamps just to hold it still. And make sure that the contact between the new panel and the old panel is very flat, very flush, with no space in between, just like this one plug weld in the corner. You can clearly see it's seated, there's no gap, and that's going to give us a much better plug weld with better penetration. Once the dozen or so plug welds are done, then we can talk about spot welding. Here's a couple of things that you want to be aware of when you're welding automotive sheet metal. Make sure you have a fire extinguisher on hand that's rated for the proper chemical fire. Have good PPE, a good welding jacket, good leather welding gloves. It's important because you don't want to expose your skin to the arc of the welder, and the welding BBs coming off, when they pop, they're going to land on your clothing and your skin, and it's really unpleasant, especially with your shoes. Make sure you have good work boots available. Also, I've got a 4 o'clock rule. I don't weld anything past 4 o'clock when I'm going to be going home later on in the afternoon. That way, if something does ignite in between two panels, which is pretty common with older cars, then you're going to be able to catch it, smell the smoke, and make sure that nothing bad happens in your shop. Just be aware of a few things. All right, so I've double checked, triple checked, and my OCD kicked in, so I really quadruple checked to make sure this is exactly where I want the roof skin to be, because I'm not going to say there's no turning back, but moving it after it's welded in is extremely difficult, and it would make me very, very sad, and there would be more martinis. But what I've done is also added a few clamps and made sure that my contacts, the mating surfaces on my plug welds, are going to be absolutely flat with no gap. That's going to give us better weld penetration and less chance of it spattering or popping or doing things like that. So we're locking it in, man. I'm super stoked. This has been a long time coming. So here we go. All right, so I want you to look at this. That right there is a good plug weld. That's what you're looking for. You've got good penetration and it's nice and flat. That shows me that my welder is dialed in and I don't ever have to think about it again. So I'm just gonna chase this down. All right, so I'll work my way around it, get the MIGs locked in, and then we'll talk about spot welding, which is my new favorite hobby. All right, so I got a little excited. I forgot about the A-pillars, the corners right here. I am going to tack these into place just so they're not flopping because we do have to dolly this over here. So the way I'm going to do this is just to tack it. I'm just going to tack it into place. I've got a nice flat level place right there. So we'll just work our way around and close that in and tap it in, and here we go. My welder's got a little too much heat in it, so I'm just going to do a series of tacks, and then I'll come back later and fully burn it in. The way I know it's got too much heat is that I'm blowing through it a little bit, so just got to be aware and be careful. Use a bit of discretion. All right, so that gets me firm on that corner. Now we can do some spot welds. I got to do the other side. Now for the 8-pillar, I'm just going to tack it in place and I'll come back and finish weld it later. But I want to make sure this is secured as well, especially since we have to roll this edge underneath with the hammer and dolly. So we'll just tack this in. All right, so that gets us locked in at that corner. Now I've got something to push against, some leverage, which is the point of the welded two panels together to roll this in and underneath. So here's why that weld didn't work. Right here we've got bare metal. Right here, I didn't strip the paint completely off. And we don't have any bare metal. Right there, it found a lucky place. So I'm gonna have to come back here and strip the paint off, but be aware that if you have a situation like that, the electrical current doesn't flow through paint. It's actually an insulator. And you gotta make sure that the inside of your surface looks clear and bare metal. All right, I'm going to finish up with a spot welder, technically known as a resistance welder. This is an inexpensive one, and it runs off 110 power. And for 2 panels, I find it does a really nice job. In fact, I've welded several panels onto this car using the resistance welder. A couple of things to consider. What happens here is that we have electrical current coming through this tong and this tong, and it completes the circuit when they close. So we have to have a closed or complete circuit with our welding material as well, with our panels. That's why I've exposed the bare metal here as well as underneath. You saw me do that earlier. So now when we pinch the 2 panels, it'll send the current through the metal and fuse it, melt it together in the middle, right where the tongs come into play. Just with e-coat or paint, you won't have that completed circuit, and you'll either have a cold weld or a weak weld, and we don't want that. So PPE, I've got gloves on. I've got the proper shade of glasses for this as well. It does not require the same shade as a MIG welder, but you do want to protect your eyes. So this is a heavy piece of gear. So I find that it's easy to be able to rest it on something. Some people hang them from an engine hoist. So with a little bit of pressure right here, now I've got a trigger, I'm going to pull. And we've got a good weld. You can look at it. I saw it glow cherry red. You can see a heat affected zone in between it, and it's dimpled down slightly. So when you take a closer look, the appeal of this type of welding is pretty obvious. There's just a minimal amount of cleanup to do on that. You just want to make sure it's a good, thorough weld. So that's why it's always important to do a couple of practice welds before you commit to doing the project. Make sure that you've got good strength and you can't pull the welds apart easily. Now I've got about 200 more to do on this car. So now it's finally time to address this edge on the side. This gets folded under. You don't want to grab it with pliers and fold it under. You've got to do a slow process, working your way front to back to front to back. This is done with a hammer and a dolly to support it. We're going to use the dolly up here and gently fold that under. The reason we support with the dolly is so that we don't create pockets or dents in there. Now, the factory had a sealer in between the roof skin and the inner roof panel. I don't, but I've made sure that I've covered all the bare metal and put a good sealer on the inner roof, as well as maintained the integrity of the e-coat on the outside. Once we're finished wrapping this under, we'll have an opportunity to wipe it with seam sealer, and we'll get that moisture protection, that corrosion barrier as well. So it'll work just fine like that. So take your time with this process. Do it slowly, work your way methodically. I'll show you how. You can see how it's slowly starting to wrap itself in around that inner panel, and we don't have any dents or distortion up top here. So it's a process. It's something that you're going to have to invest a little bit of elbow grease, arm strength, and time into. But we're just going to keep on keeping on. So I can feel just a little bit of distortion. You're going to have to expect that. Most of the time, it'll prime out with some high build primer. Sometimes they can be metal finished out, filed. Sometimes you need a wipe of a finishing putty or some body filler to take care of that. But for the most part, that's nice and crisp. when we look at the inside edge, you can see the folded over edge. It's just a decent looking seam. I'll have the opportunity to wipe that with seam sealer. Then the weather seals go in, and all of that's hidden by the weather stripping and the window seal anyway. So that gets us done with the panel fully installed. I'll come back and finish these welds and grind them flush, but there's one more thing I want to show you. One more thing. One last thing is to replace the factory sealing between the two panels, although our silent drive products kind of take the place of that as well. But we want to make sure that there's no rattling or no compressing or no weird noises going down the road, so we're going to replace it. We're using this. It is a flexible urethane foam, and the benefit of this is that it remains squishy even when it's fully cured. Now, if we used a typical windshield urethane or a seam sealer in between there, yes, it would hold the panel still, but there's a chance that you're going to see those dimples during heat cycles, possibly during paint work and body work, and this stuff, it won't ever show through. There's an instruction sheet with this, but I'll show you the quick method of how this stuff works. So we've got two parts, an A and a B. Dual mix stands for equal parts, so it's not an epoxy, but it is a two-part. So we take the outer cap off with a screwdriver. That opens up the A and the B side. This does require a specialty dispenser, and you can see there's two plungers on the inside of that. When you pull the trigger, it has even pressure on each side. And so we'll get it started. We've got two different tips. You can see what happens in the tip. A side and B side get mixed up so that by the time they come out the end, they're thoroughly intermixed. Having said that, what we're going to do is just dispense a little bit out, make sure that they're coming out evenly. Now we know they are. All right, there's A and B part. It's a great idea to wear gloves and safety glasses with this stuff too, because you don't want to wear it and it's just good PPE, best practice. So before we commit, I'm going to actually lay out a bead as long as the tip. That, to me, is an insurance policy that everything is intermixed by the time it comes to the end. You can kind of already see it foaming up right there. Here's something else to pay attention to. On the product itself, it says working time is 15 seconds. Set time is 2 minutes. This stuff rocks. It goes pretty dang quick. You can see it's getting ahead of us on the tip there. And that's what it does in there. So a little goes a long way. Let's go up into here. So I'm just going to go inside those captured panels. I'll just give it a little bit there. A little bit there. There. I'm going to do about 4 to 6 places in this ceiling. Like I said, it doesn't require much. We've got 6 blobs in there, just a little bit of anti-rattle resistance. So you can see what it does here. This isn't fully cured yet, but it remains flexible like that. So when you're doing a restoration, it's the little things like this that really make a big difference in the end result of your project. We haven't talked about this seam right here. The factory used lead to fill in this seam. We're not going to work with lead because there's some safer alternatives. Auto body fillers like a short strand fiberglass or a metal infused filler will do a nice job of filling this seam in and will tolerate the thickness that is required, and they have a direct to metal application. So they'll seal it out, fill it in, and take the place, be a substitute for the lead coatings. Right here, all we need is a thin skim of polyester body filler and we're good to go. All right, check this out. Still sounds hollow and tinny right here. It sounds like a wooden door. So insulation, success. So I hope that this video gives you a little bit of inspiration and maybe a little bit of empowerment to go out and do something like this in your own garage. I also hope that it's shown you what kind of tools, time, and skill that it takes to tackle something like this on your own. Remember, they're never too far gone. Thanks for watching AMD Garage. We'll see you out in the shop.